Introducing Sing It with Oreo, where you can turn your voice into
Okay, I guess we're just not gonna have a chat box for this, since apparently it doesn't want to work. So let's just go to the actual. I'm gonna have to hunt down King. Apparently King is is infecting me. Hello everyone. Yeah, I had my mic muted because otherwise you probably would have heard me talking to my cat a whole bunch. And apparently we're just gonna have that black box above me because for whatever reason, chat doesn't want to work with Streamlabs. It worked the last time I did a stream, which was admittedly forever ago. But you watch King enough, the shit show infects you as well. So, you know what? I'm just going to get rid of that entirely because otherwise it's going to annoy me. And do that. There we go. So, hello everyone. Even though my chat on screen wasn't working, I do have actual chat working. I am Captain Rachel, and if you are here, when you join the shit show, you cannot leave. True. Very, very true. When you join the shit show, it affects every part of your life. So, happy President's Day weekend, everyone. I've decided to do a stream about presidential assassinations. So, let's get into this first of all with a little bit of who the heck am I? So, I am a real high school teacher. I am credentialed in California, which fancy way of saying I'm official. I've gone through entirely too much schooling to be paid entirely too little, but I am able to legally teach in a California school. So I currently teach high school in, I'm just going to say Central Valley, because that's most of California. So, you know, that's not really allowing someone to track me down that easily. Additionally, I run something called the History Scribe, which is a big history blog that uses Tumblr. Because, yes, I am Tumblr trash, and I am going to stay on that platform until it just burns down around me. You can find me most places as Captain Rachel, either with an underscore or a dash, depending upon the situation. Probably most active these days in King's interesting community that he has created online. But I also do other stuff as well, like Captain Dash Rachel is sort of my main Tumblr, because again, Tumblr trash. So let's talk about what the heck we're doing here, why the heck we're here, what's going on entirely. So President's Day. What the heck is President's Day? President's Day is officially a day to remember and celebrate all United States presidents. It is the third Monday in February, so this year that happens to fall on my birthday, which, huzzah, I'm going to be entirely too old. Yay. President's Day is a state holiday in most states. It was originally established in 1885 in honor of President George Washington, the first president, the one that we've basically made a saint. And originally, President's Day took place on his actual birthday. His actual birthday was February 22nd. But there was this thing that happened in 1971 that the federal government went, maybe it would be a good idea to have holidays happen on Mondays. So they did that, and they moved a lot of federal holidays, one of which was President's Day, to Mondays in order to make them a 3-day weekend so that, you know, you can let the working class have some time off. It also helps that, you know, Lincoln's birthday is on February 12th, so moving it to the 15th is kind of splitting the difference. But in general, when we're talking about President's Day, really the only thing that most of us care about is if we get the day off work. I get the day off work. I have a 3-day weekend this weekend, and that means that I'm not as busy on a usual weekend because, fun fact, teachers spend their weekends preparing for the next week. So I was thinking about the fact that I had a 3-day weekend, and King, aka this asshole, who some people here might not be familiar with, King Slayer, he commented like, he kept commenting, Captain Rachel says she streams, but she only streams in the summer. So I decided, what the heck, let's do something in honor of President's Day. Originally, I was going to do this on President's Day, but as much as I like streaming, I also like just, lazing around on my birthday. So I was thinking, what should I do for President's Day? And, okay, it's a day to remember and celebrate all the United States presidents. Maybe I should do something looking at all the presidents. But, we've had a lot of presidents. Even if I did, the most sort of cursory glance at every single one of them, it would take entirely too damn long. So then I was like, what can I do that might be interesting? Let's talk about presidential assassinations. So we have had 4 presidents so far that have been assassinated, and then because I'm me and I can't just do anything by half, I decided to add in a special mention and a few attempted assassinations. We're not going to talk about every attempted assassination because pretty much every president has had, multiple attempted assassinations. We're just going to kind of talk about the 2 really interesting ones, or the ones I found really interesting. We're going to go sort of chronologically. So we're actually going to start off with our honorable mention. So our honorable mention for presidents goes to this gentleman right here in his very dramatic cloak. This is William Henry Harrison, and he is kind of infamously remembered as the shortest time spent in office. So he was the 9th president of the United States, and by days, he spent the least amount of time in office of any president, because his term of office, the time he spent as president, was only 31 days long. He spent a month in office. So this starts off as happens with most presidents, starts off with his inaugural address. So when we swear in presidents, nowadays it happens in January. It used to happen much later in the year, in March. So Thursday, March 4th, 1841, it's his day to be sworn in as president, and he delivers the longest inaugural address in history. No president has ever come close to matching this address. It was over 8,000 words and took him 2 hours to read. So he delivers that, and the popular story about William Henry Harrison, the story you might have heard maybe, is that his speech was so long he caught a cold and died. The actual truth is kind of worse than that. The actual truth is that Washington, D.C.'s lack of a sewer system killed William Henry Harrison. You see, Harrison didn't actually get sick until March 26th, so it wasn't the inaugural address. Yes, it was really cold on the day he was sworn in, and he went on a parade and stood outside in a receiving line shaking people's hands, but what actually killed him was the fact that DC didn't have a sewer system. This is, 1841. Even if it did have a sewer systems were not that great back then. And it just so happened that the White House's water supply, where the White House got its water from, was 7 blocks downstream of a night soil depository. Does anyone in chat know or want to take a guess at what a night soil depository is? So night soil, a term you will hear a little bit if you get into history of a certain time. Night soil is poop. Night soil is poop. So 7 blocks upstream from where the White House got its water, people were just dumping poop into the river. So understandably, you don't really want to drink water when there's poop in it. There's a whole lot of not fun stuff, especially when that poop is human poop. So he died because of that. It's one of those, we don't know exactly what it was, but there were several other presidents. William Henry Harrison, he's the only guy that dies in office because of this. It probably helped that I think at the time he was the oldest guy ever to become president. And, obviously it's going to mean more as you go back farther in history. But there were several other presidents who got really sick, and there were 1 or 2 other presidents who died after leaving office. So yeah, 31 days, shortest time. Hopefully no other president ever does that. So that was our honorable mention. After this point, we're going to be entirely talking about assassinations. So let's start off with making a little bit of a distinction. What's the difference between assassination and murder? Because I've had students that have used the 2 terms, interchangeably, And in, common everyday parlance, it's pretty easy to say that, but there is a difference. Yeah, night soil was kind of the polite way of saying it, and it did, as far as my understanding of the I forget the word for it, but the origin of the word did come from bedpans and stuff like that, because in the olden days, before indoor plumbing, you had a little pot under the bed, and if you had to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, you went into that pot, and then if you were a rich person, your servant emptied it. If not, you emptied it. So, assassination versus murder. Assassination is a murder, but not. Let me say that again. All assassinations that are successful are murders, but not all murders are assassinations. Assassination is the murder of a prominent person or a political figure, usually for payment, you've been paid to do it, or for political reasons. So essentially, to be assassinated, you have to be someone important, and there's usually an element of politics behind it. Murder is just someone else killing another person. And because of this, not all killings of prominent people are murders. Think of like your typical crime of passion, like you're cheating on your wife and she kills you. Even if you're the president, that's not going to be an assassination. That's just going to be a murder because there's not that sort of political movement involved. So now that we've got that down, let's look through assassinations, starting, of course, with the granddaddy of all of them, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. So Abraham Lincoln over here, very famous portrait of him. He was the 16th president of the United States, and of course the president during the Civil War. So, I'm going to occasionally throw around dates. Full disclosure, I don't have these dates memorized. I looked up all of this stuff. When I teach, I don't teach with a hey, what date did this battle happen? What date did that happen? I teach with more of a sort of the story of history. So, Abraham Lincoln, famously the president during the Civil War, the president that's seen as sort of guiding us through the Civil War. And he is assassinated 6 weeks into his second term. So he'd served 4 years as president, he had been elected again, and 6 weeks into that second term, he is assassinated by John Wilkes Booth, who is this gentleman on the right. Now, John Wilkes Booth sort of sets America off on an interesting precedent in terms of the insanity, weirdness, strangeness of presidential assassins. Because John Wilkes Booth is a nationally famous actor. So, we're still back in the time of theater. This is way, way before anything like, movie cameras or anything like that. He was a very well-known actor, famous throughout the nation. I think he even might have gone and played in Europe once or twice. Lincoln had actually seen John Wilkes Booth perform in a play in 1863, but of course John Wilkes Booth is a Confederate sympathizer. So this is happening during kind of the final days of the Civil War. The Civil War is kind of all but done at this point, and John Wilkes Booth is on the side of the Confederacy. He is pro-slavery. Everyone at this time was racist. Many people still are racist, but he was, on the more racist side of things. Yeah, you need to be important. Yeah, assassination. So you either need to be important, or sometimes we use assassination for, if I pay someone to kill someone. So most of the time it's important people get assassinated, but every now and then you'll have it be wife sought to assassinate her husband in order that they didn't get a divorce. But yeah, sadly, probably none of us will ever be important enough to be actually assassinated. So John Wilkes Booth is a big sympathizer for the Confederacy, and he originally was planning to kidnap Lincoln. There's always a chance. Stranger things have happened in American history. So John Wilkes Booth originally planned just to kidnap Lincoln. He didn't start off planning to assassinate him. And the reason John Wilkes Booth wanted to kidnap Lincoln is that during the Civil War, both sides took prisoners of war. And every now and then, they would exchange prisoners. Hey, give us some of the Union soldiers, we'll give you back some of your Confederate soldiers. That exchange of prisoners had stopped during the Civil War at a certain point. One big reason for it, well, sort of two reasons. One reason, the North was winning. Another reason, the South was really hard up for labor. so one of my favorite, like, it's called a mockumentary, so it's a documentary, but it's like set in the world where the South won the war. And while I love like various, what if history stories like that, there kind of really was no way for the South to win the war. The South, you know, common perception of the South, it's a bunch of rednecks, playing the banjo in the woods. In terms of military might, that's kind of true when it comes to the Civil War. So part of the reason that prisoners were not being exchanged is that the North had realized, we're exchanging these prisoners and they're going right back into battle. If we stop exchanging these prisoners, the South is going to lose faster. So John Wilkes Booth was all like big brain plan. He's like, I'm going to kidnap Lincoln. I'm going to exchange Lincoln for a bunch of soldiers and the South is going to win. Very doubtful any of that would happen. But very quickly, Booth stopped talking kidnapping and started talking assassination. There is a wealth of resources of like letters that Booth sent to various friends of his. Especially there was we tend to present this assassination and all assassinations as like one man shows, like Lincoln versus Booth. Booth definitely had more of a network conspiring with him. So, for example of like sort of how quickly Booth had started talking assassination, Booth kept a diary, which we managed to find after all this went down. And Booth actually attended Lincoln's second inauguration. So this picture down in the lower corner here, so there's Abraham Lincoln giving his second inaugural address, and then right up there, that's John Wilkes Booth. So this man who wanted to kill the president got, pretty darn close to the president. And in his diary entry from that day, he wrote, "What an excellent chance I had, if I wished, to kill the president on Inauguration Day." He didn't. I've seen a few different arguments for why. Like, one argument said like that he didn't have a gun at that time. Another argument said that he was still kind of like debating that he was going to kidnap. But one of the big lessons to take away from this stream is going to be that the United States takes a long time to realize that it needs to protect the president. So John Wilkes Booth has a plan. John Wilkes Booth is going to go through with that plan. April 14th, Booth writes in his diary, "Our cause being almost lost, something decisive and great must be done." So again, Civil War is rapidly reaching the point where the North is going to win. At this point, it would have been like almost at the point where it's not a question of is the North going to win, it's a question of when is the North going to win. So Booth is, wanting to assassinate Lincoln. And that day, he's getting his mail. He was kind of like running around, like going to a lot of different hotels in Washington, D.C. While he was getting his mail at the theater, he learned that Lincoln and Ulysses Grant, who is a general in the Army and would go on to be a president, were going to see the play Our American Cousin that night at Ford Theater. Villains writing their ideas into diaries is kind of like movie villain exposition. Why would you use? Yes, but there's actually a fair amount of that in. I think that's going to pop up in a few different either diaries or like letters and stuff. And some of the presidential assassinations, like especially the last one we're going to talk about, the last attempted assassination we're going to talk about, is very much like this reads like something out of a movie. So nowadays, I mean, they still do this. They'll, say, hey, the president's going to do this, the president's going to do that. But in early American history, the schedule of the president was a lot more like you could just run into them on the street level. So, they're going to go to a theater with their wives. They're going to see this play. And again, the Secret Service doesn't exist at this point. So this is very much like everyone was just kind of like, oh yeah, everyone's going to be chill. No one's going to try and kill the president. So Booth, again, is an actor. He had performed at that theater, at Ford's Theater, several times. So Booth knew the layout of the theater, and the staff at the theater knew him. So they might be like, hey, it's a little weird that guy's here when he's not in the play, but they weren't going to think it was too weird. And he'd kind of kept a lot of his, anti-Lincoln hate on the down low. So Booth has this plan. He's got several conspirators, and his plan is that they are going to Booth is going to go and kill Lincoln and Grant, because again, Grant is a high-ranking military guy, while his conspirators kill the Secretary of State and the Vice President. The problem is, even with this plan, a lot of Booth's plan is really weird. Booth knows in advance that he's going to be able to go and, see this. But Booth only has a single-shot pistol. So his plan is to go in, shoot the president, and then stab Grant, who again is a military dude, so he must have had a lot of faith in himself. In any case, it doesn't end up mattering. Grant actually does not attend. Supposedly Grant's wife and Lincoln's wife really hated each other and just were never in the same place. So Lincoln ends up attending with a friend of the family or something like that. So Lincoln's party arrived late after the play had already begun. It was Lincoln, his wife, and then a military friend of theirs sort of thing, and his wife. So the play had already begun. They actually interrupted the play so that the orchestra could play Hail to the Chief, which, you just know there was some, theater snob in the audience who was like, why are they interrupting this play? I don't care about the president. So everyone knew when Lincoln had arrived. There was no, element of subtlety to it. And Booth used his fame to be allowed up to Lincoln's box, because he's in this little box seating thing. The thing is, so he's going to shoot Lincoln. Booth is just allowed in. There is a soldier at the door. Again, Secret Service does not exist at this time. There's a soldier at the door to the booth. But Booth actually just goes here's my calling card that says he's an actor. And the guy's like, oh, sure, yeah, go in with the president without me, patting you down or anything. So Booth slips in. It's a play, so it's all dark and they're not paying attention to people around them. And then he waits to a very specific moment in the play. So he doesn't just, charge in and shoot Lincoln. He actually waits until one of the play's most hilarious lines, because the play they're watching is a comedy. So while everyone in the audience is laughing, that's when he shoots Abraham Lincoln. Now, the bullet goes through Lincoln's skull just behind his left ear, passes through his brain, and comes to rest near the front of his skull. Doesn't go out. So he has that one shot. This is actually the gun that he used down here. He makes that shot count. Even today, especially today, if he had a modern weapon, that would be just instant death. So the Major Rathbone, who is the guy sitting with Lincoln and his wife, tries to grab Booth, but gets stabbed in the forearm for his trouble. And Booth jumps from the box to the stage below. Now, accounts differ at this point. Some people say that he didn't say anything. Some people say that he basically let out a grunt. But kind of the generally agreed historical view is that he said, sic semper tyrannis, which is Latin, because again, he's an actor, so he's a dramatic bitch. It's Latin for thus always to tyrants, which is kind of interesting considering that Booth was supporting the side that had slaves and Lincoln was supporting the side that was getting rid of slavery. So, again, America's just kind of entirely unprepared for this to happen, and it just takes everyone by surprise. I put a lot more info on these because I sort of use them as notes for myself that I'm actually going to read out. But, there's they essentially go is there a doctor in the house? And so, one of those is an army surgeon, this gentleman pictured right here. And he pushes through the crowd while another physician is lifted up from the stage to attend to the president. And at first, they think that he was stabbed. Again, Booth had timed the shot so that everyone in the theater was laughing, so that, no one had actually heard the gunshot. So they start, ripping open his shirt to be like, where's the stab? Because, again, one of the other guys had been stabbed. And it's not until, a little after they're like, wait, there's no stab wound, that the gunshot wound is found, because it would have been, covered up by his hair. At the scene, the moment the wound is found, the doctor pronounces it mortal, meaning that it's gonna kill Lincoln. This is, Lincoln's not dead yet, but Lincoln is gonna be dead. So they make the decision that they're going to move Lincoln to the nearest house, which is just across the street. They believe that taking a carriage ride back would be too dangerous, that he would just die. They end up in the house of a tailor, and Lincoln is laid across the bed diagonally because he is so tall. And I can't imagine what it would have been like to be in that room, knowing that, of course, I think nowadays if something similar like that happened, there would be an effort to, save the president, both because he's the president and modern medicine. But at the time, really, all they could do is sort of be like, let's try and make you more comfortable, and we can't do much. So a whole bunch of people come by to pay their respects. Officials, physicians, just kind of everyone's, making this pilgrimage over to this random person's house to, say goodbye to Lincoln. Lincoln's older son was actually allowed in to see his father, but his younger son was kept away. Interestingly enough, they kept sending his wife out. Like there's all these reports of her being like too hysterical, and they thought that she would like unnerve the president. It's like, the dude's dying. Let his wife be hysterical. Let his wife be with him. But Lincoln eventually dies at 7:22 a.m. on April 15th, 1865. So at this point, America has lost its first president to an assassination. Oh, and this is actually, this is right here, is one of the doctors used that to probe the wound. And these are little bits of Lincoln's skull, which were removed from the wound sort of while he lay dying. So Booth flees, but he is very quickly found and apprehended. So one of the interesting things about this is during the Civil War, Washington, D.C. is really close to the Confederacy. Virginia was part of the Confederacy. So he's kind of fairly easily able to get out of Washington, D.C. and get over into Confederate land, but he is being pursued. There's a huge reward out for his arrest, and eventually he reaches a place called Garrett's Farm. He arrives there, he's hiding there for a few days, and then he is killed when Union soldiers approach the farm. As a note, like, the reward for his arrest, $50,000 at the time, is a lot more today. Inflation is a fun thing. So that reward poster is offering, almost $800,000 for, I think it's even just like information leading to the arrest. So Lincoln dies, and you get very sort of slightly homoerotic fan art being made of him. This is actually from the time showing like Washington welcoming Lincoln into the afterlife while angels, cry for him. There's a lot of really weird political art in American and world history that I just love finding whenever I can. So Abraham Lincoln's death is very interesting because, yeah, I know it is a bit, it's not the worst I've ever seen. There's a really good one. I wish I'd thrown it in just to make a comparison. Apparently Napoleon Bonaparte and I'm forgetting the guy's name, but he was the Tsar of Russia at the time, were like really close friends. So there's this one like fan art political thing of them basically that shows them like embracing. But yeah, this is legitimate. This is made like, again, like this is the very like the person who drew this, if they were alive today, would be like, no homo man, but it's just supposed to be patriotic. It's supposed to be, religious. So, but the thing about Assassinations is America seems really bad at learning from them, because this happens and there's kind of nothing done. Like, a lot of it seems to have gotten written off as, oh, we were in a civil war. This would never happen if it wasn't for a civil war. So there isn't really any protection given to presidents. And it's more dumb luck than anything that nothing happens for a while. Oh, also, the news of Lincoln going around the world sometimes got misinterpreted. This is a Japanese magazine from the time depicting the assassination of Lincoln, but apparently the news got a little warped in translation, so that apparently in Japan they printed news that he just gotten like attacked by like 3 guys with knives. So, news, not always reliable. So it's very much just kind of like sheer dumb luck that we don't have another president assassinated until James Garfield. So James Garfield, 20th President of the United States, assassinated about 4 months into his first term. And his assassin is a man by the name of Charles J. Guiteau. And I did not look up how to pronounce a lot of these names, so I'm probably going to mangle them. But here's Garfield, and here's his assassin. Now, this is also another trend in assassins, is them either being in mental asylums or having, various other issues with sanity. So Charles here had been committed to an insane asylum by his family in 1875, but had actually escaped from that asylum and just kind of never gotten taken back. He failed at many, many different things, just kept failing at stuff. Like, he even failed at being part of a utopian, cult community. So he decided to try his hand at politics. And he wrote this speech. So, this is all happening before, radio, before TV and all that. So the way that you were convinced to vote for someone is either that person or their supporters would go around giving speeches. Vote for Garfield, vote for this, vote for that. And so Charles wrote a speech in 1880. And this was a speech. It was originally written for a different presidential candidate, but then Garfield ended up being the one that was, I want to say Republican, but I'm not sure about that. I forgot to write that down. So the problem is, this speech that he wrote was really shit. It was really, really lame. He never actually gave it as a speech. He just printed up several hundred copies and distributed it. But despite that, he was convinced that his speech was the reason that Garfield had become president. To sort of put this into perception, into modern day terms, this would be like if King in a stream once said, vote for insert candidate here, and then became convinced that he was the reason that candidate had gotten elected. I actually read, I tried to read the guy's actual speech, but it was really, really bad. And I did read a historian's account that actually was kind of jokingly saying that, if anything, this made people not vote for Garfield. So he writes this speech. He is convinced that it is the reason that Garfield was elected. So in Guitau's mind, Garfield owes him a job. And setting aside the whole fact that his speech didn't really work, this was something that happened at the time. Because nowadays there's more laws against it. It still happens, but there's laws against it. It was very common that if you were elected president, or if you were elected to kind of any office, like even governors of states or state senators, etc., you were expected to reward your supporters with political appointments. So it was very common that you would just kind of replace whole big chunks of Washington, D.C.'s positions. Nowadays, a lot more of them are protected there, no matter who's the president. It's just your job. So Guiteau thinks that he's going to get a job. And not just any job. He thinks that he's going to get a really good one. He had written that he was I would ideally want to be ambassador to Italy. But if Italy's already given to someone, then I guess you can give me Paris. Which, those are... Being an ambassador to Italy or to France is a big, big deal. So this guy, very clearly has some issues with understanding many, many things. But he expects to get that job. He actually goes to the inauguration for Garfield expecting that, he's going to get a job. He just kind of leaves everything, heads to Washington, D.C. without much more than the clothes on his back, thinking that he's going to be some high-flying ambassador. That doesn't happen, of course. And for a while he tries to, he actually bugs the White House enough that they, bar him from, the White House, waiting room and stuff like that. So at that point, he's like, well, Garfield's not going to give me a job, guess I'm going to have to kill him. So he borrows $15 from a relative, which I think is the equivalent of, if you're, borrowing, $300 today. Borrows $15 from a relative, and buys this Webley caliber British Bulldog revolver, which is a big honking gun. It's one of those, the angle here doesn't quite show it very well, but it's a really big, gun. And he actually specifically took the time to buy the more expensive ivory grip. You can't see it in this photo because it's a black and white photo. The Smithsonian used to have this gun, but at some point it went missing in their collection. But the grip of it is ivory. And the reason that he bought the ivory grip is that he thought it would look better in a museum display. So he was taking into account future museum displays when he made the decision to kill Garfield. He stalks Garfield for a bit, but again, it's one of those, every time I think about the level of protection that presidents had, it's insane. Because again, Secret Service isn't a thing. So on July 2nd, 1881, Garfield was scheduled to leave D.C. for a summer vacation. He's heading out of town. Now, nowadays, if a president was going to go on a summer vacation, it'd be either going by those helicopters or a military convoy or something. When Garfield went on a summer vacation, he literally just walked down to the train station. No guards, no army members, nothing at all. Like, he had some people walking with him, like one of which was one of Abraham Lincoln's sons, actually. But literally no protection whatsoever. So, because this and his schedule had been reported in newspapers, the assassin knows exactly where to find Garfield. He has no bodyguard, no security detail. So Guiteau goes to the Baltimore and Pontiac railroad station and waits for him, and just shoots him in the back, point black range from behind. Garfield apparently yelled out, "My God, what is that?" And then he fired again, and Garfield collapsed. So, just like, hey, it's one of those, like, we think of murders like that happening to normal people, not that being an assassination of just walk up to someone and shoot them. So, very quickly, though, he's arrested. Like, a police officer was running toward the gunfire and essentially ran into him. Garfield is carried back to the White House, and they, were like, "Okay, you've been shot. What's going on?" And this is where it gets a little bit, like, kind of sad to me. The first bullet had only grazed Garfield's shoulder, so hadn't really, little wound, but hadn't really hurt him. That was why he had yelled out, like, "What is that? I'm being shot at," but he doesn't know that. The second struck him in the back, missing his spine and ending up near his pancreas. And this bullet was not necessarily lethal, because Garfield survived the shooting. The problem was, the bullet was still in him. And doctors kept poking at him with unsterilized fingers and instruments to try and find it. So, nowadays, if someone got shot, you're going to maybe keep pressure or something. You're not going to, like, try and get the bullet with your bare, dirty hands. That's exactly what, like, the best doctors in the land who are attending the president did. The problem is, Americans at the time apparently didn't believe in, like, washing their hands if they were doctors. So because of that, and they keep poking because they keep trying to find the bullet, his wound gets super infected, like super nasty. They also managed to puncture his liver and his gallbladder, which are not good things to puncture. So he's alive, but as time goes on, he's getting sicker and sicker because he's got that infection and it's getting into his blood. And it has some dramatic effects. His weight drops from 210 to just 130 pounds. He can't digest food, so he has to get nutrition enemas. And if you don't know, an enema is when they put a tube up your butt and pour something in it. That's the only way that he can get nutrition, because if he tries to digest it, it's going into all that infection. Yeah, lots of ew. He suffers severe hallucinations, and he gets these pus-filled abscesses all over his body. So just big old pockets of pus everywhere. And again, all of this is the fault of the doctors. The fault of the doctors entirely. Eventually, in September 19th, 1881, he dies. And so that's 79 days after he was shot. And those 79 days, like, some of them might not have been that bad at the beginning, but most of those would have been horrible, just agony. It was 2 months before his 50th birthday as well. So, that's not exactly good. So that's what happens to Garfield. Garfield dies because it is an assassination. What about his assassin? So he went to trial. He was represented by his brother-in-law. And the trial was just weird. I kind of want to try and hunt down the transcripts now that I've read about this because it just sounds ridiculous. He insulted his defense team. He would testify by reciting poems. He passed notes to get legal advice from the audience. So, like, he has his brother-in-law being his attorney, and he's going to just the random spectators asking for legal advice. And throughout all of this, he remained convinced that he was, like, the good guy. He thought the American public liked him, even though people tried to kill him twice, like when he was in jail. Like, there was one attempt when he was being taken to jail, like in the immediate aftermath of the shooting, and then there was one attempt while he was in jail. So, very, very clearly, we don't know exactly what, because, different views of mental health and stuff like that at the time that this happened. But very clearly there was something going on with Charles with Charles. Something not all right up there. Oh, he also thought he was going to be released, so he made plans to run for president in 1884. Which, admittedly, weirder things have happened in United States history, but that would have been pretty darn weird. Of course, he's found guilty, and on June 30th, 1882, he is executed by hanging. That was the way, actually, that, so John Wilkes Booth was shot while attempting to escape, but if John Wilkes Booth had not been shot and died due to that, he would have died due to hanging. That was the way that Washington, D.C. killed people at that point. And his final words are a weird little poem he wrote, which I'm going to put up on the screen here, but I feel like if I actually read that, I would go a little bit crazy. But yeah, he read out this poem / song sort of thing, and he had permission, this was his last words, so he like dropped his head at the end, and that was the indication that he was done, and that's when he was killed. And his brain is actually still preserved. It is apparently currently at the Mutter Museum, which I think is in Chicago. I'm forgetting exactly where. But after he died, they dissected him and tried to see, is there something in the brain that could explain why the heck this guy did this. So at this point, we've had 2 presidents killed by assassination. And they finally start to maybe wise up a little bit with, hey, maybe we should protect the guy that's leading the United States. But they don't wise up enough, because it's going to happen again fairly soon afterwards, all things considered. This kind of possessed-looking dude right here, this is William McKinley. He was the 25th president of the United States and president during the Spanish-American War. He has the unfortunateness of, even though he was assassinated, he gets forgotten because he's followed up by one of the most popular presidents. William McKinley is assassinated 6 months into his second term. So again, he'd been president 4 years, got reelected. 6 months into his second term, he is assassinated. And this was the one that I should have looked up because, oh god, that last name. I'm just going to say Leon, because again, forgot to look up the last names. And when I try and read words I don't know how to pronounce, I tend to pronounce them the French way, because that's the other language that I speak. So this is his assassin right here. He's an assassin. I'm not that sorry about not being able to say his last name. So the assassin of William McKinley was an anarchist who lost his job and thought it was his duty to kill McKinley. And part of the reason for this is at the time there were a lot of assassins, mostly or almost entirely in Europe, that were done by anarchists. This was kind of like the thing that anarchists did at the time. So in 1901, which is when the assassination is going to go down, America was hosting the Pan American Exposition World's Fair. So a World's Fair, if you haven't heard that term before, it's an exhibition to show the achievements of different nations. It's kind of like take like a county fair or a state fair and make it for, on a nationwide level. They used to be really big things. For example, the Eiffel Tower is a result of a World's Fair that France hosted. There's a few things in America that are left around that are remnants of World's Fairs. So used to be a big deal, not really a big deal anymore. And McKinley decided to attend this World's Fair despite various people asking him not to, mostly for security reasons. And he very infamously said, "Why should I not go? No one would wish to hurt me." Very, very wrong. He was very wrong. So at this fair, he visits the fair on September 5th, 1901. He gives some speeches, and everything goes well, so the next day he's coming back. Specifically on September 6th, he was going to hold a public reception where he was going to shake hands with people. I think mostly because of this. This isn't a real big thing in politics anymore. I mean, you still get it, but this is quite literally just president stands there, shakes hands with people in a line. This was apparently McKinley's favorite part of the job, and he'd put some effort into trying to be the best handshaker that he could. He could shake 50 hands per minute, which is, I guess, impressive. It's one of those, it's I'm impressed, but I don't know why I'm impressed at that. Now, as I said, there'd been a little bit of hey, maybe we should protect the president. So usually people could only approach the president if their hands were empty. So it's like, if you want to come near the president, he had some bodyguards. Again, Secret Service still not a thing. Is that two-handed or just the right? I don't actually know if it was two-handed or just the right. I would assume that it was probably, right hand with maybe a little bit of grasping. Because I think I read a little bit of, like, one of the ways he could shake hands so fast was he'd, like, perfected the art of shake, move to the next hand. So I'm going to assume it was something like two-handed. So usually people could only approach with empty hands. However, it was really, really hot that day. So people were allowed to approach with handkerchiefs. And the assassin made use. There's this little diagram right here showing that he had a gun that he sort of hid in his handkerchief. And in the hustle and bustle of the crowd, it was not detected. So he gets up, gets literally right next to McKinley and shoots him twice. Instantly, the assassin is grabbed and McKinley is taken to the hospital at the exposition. The problem is, while the exposition has a hospital, there's no fully qualified doctor on call at that point. The doctor on call had actually gone somewhere else to tend to like a wound in the neck or something like that. So the only people there to attend to the president are nurses and interns. And not to rag on either of them, but when you're shot at that close range, you kind of want a doctor there. Now, again, this is not good. Historically, abdominal wounds to the center of your body, just meant death. Like, for most of human history, if you got shot, like, anywhere kind of near your stomach or your upper chest, but especially your stomach, you were just going to die of infection, and all the doctors were going to be able to do was ease the pain. It was only in 1884, so like 15 years previously, I think, that the first successful operation of that kind had happened. So already the odds are against McKinley. He's got a wound in kind of the worst spot, or one of the worst spots. The hospital, this is an actual picture of like the surgery room in the hospital. It lacked a lot of supplies. Like one of the basic supplies it lacked was a retractor, which is used to pull back like flesh to expose underneath. Even though a lot of the exhibition had electric lights, the hospital did not. So not exactly good times. Things are made even more complicated by the fact that McKinley was not a very strong guy. He was not in the best of health. He was obese, which made things even harder, made it very hard to find the bullet. The doctor that was called in managed to sew up the holes in McKinley's stomach, but he couldn't find the bullet. And for a while, it seemed like McKinley was going to recover, but it quickly became apparent that, kind of like Garfield, he was dying of infection. He, at least it seems from the accounts I read, that he died a bit easier than Garfield, but still not a very good way to go. September 14th, 1901, McKinley dies of gangrene. And here we have, again, one of those kind of artistic, not as quite as homoerotic. We've just got some little sort of angel people. I think these are actually supposed to represent, like, the United States in some way, guiding McKinley into the Hall of Martyrs with Lincoln and Garfield. But very quickly, McKinley's one of those that you just kind of forget him. I mean, most presidents, you just kind of forget him. But McKinley has the really bad luck of, when McKinley dies, as happens, the vice president becomes president. McKinley's vice president was a dude by the name of Teddy Roosevelt, who we'll be talking about in a second. So, September 23rd, 1901, Leon goes on trial, and he just completely refuses to cooperate. He's like, nope, not going to be involved in this, do your own thing. He is found guilty and sentenced to death. This whole event, sorry, my cat was making a weird noise. If he comes over here, I'll show him off to the camera. So he's found guilty, sentenced to death, and he really sort of, anarchist kind of already had a bad name. He definitely gives anarchists more of a bad name at the time. He is actually executed via the electric chair, and this is an actual photograph of him just moments before his execution. So, and he's so despised that he's executed via electric chair, and then acid is placed in his casket before he's buried to dissolve his body. So, this is the point where, again, they'd learned at least a little something with the death of Garfield, because McKinley had like guards, but newspapers really heavily criticize the lack of protection for American presidents. So it's at this point that we finally get the Secret Service. The Secret Service had already existed. They had been focused mainly on the Treasury, which they still focus on a bit today. But this is why the Secret Service starts protecting President Teddy Roosevelt, who's the next. He was, again, McKinley's vice president. And that became an official policy in 1906. At first, it was just kind of like, well, let's just give you someone who can help protect you. So this is the point where we're going to go to one of our first attempted. Because Teddy Roosevelt is actually the target of one of the first sort of noteworthy attempts. Hey, bud, you want to say hi to Chad? Who's that? So, let's see. I'm going to wiggle out of my arms before I can shift to the... There we go. Have him talk. Meow. This is my cat, Mythos, who... You're grumbly. So this is my cat, Mythos. He is a grumbly boy. So he's not gonna want me to... He's not really a cuddly cat. He likes to sort of do his own thing. And probably at some point, now that I've done that, he's going to come up behind me and like put his claws on my back. He likes to do that when I'm talking on Skype or what have you. So that usually one of the ways that the teaching is working due to COVID is we have certain days where like all the students are distance learning. On other days, I have like half the class in class and the other half coming in via like Skype or what have you, or Zoom. But on certain days, all of them come in by Zoom, and I record videos for that. And he likes to go up my back when I do that. So there is like sort of a bit of stuff being done. So McKinley is succeeded by Teddy Roosevelt, who's going to be the subject of the first attempted assassination we're going to talk about. So Teddy, also known as Theodore Roosevelt, he is the 26th president of the United States, and he is often ranked as in one of the top 5 for best presidents. He's one of the Mount Rushmore faces. I've got him circled in red here. So, very, very influential guy. This is the president who starts the national parks, for example, because he was really big into outdoors. And he was interesting. He survived an assassination attempt in 1912. So his would-be assassin is a man by the name of John Fleming Schrank, which again, probably mispronouncing. He was a New York saloon keeper, a barkeeper, and he claimed that William McKinley had visited him in a dream and told Schrank to avenge his assassination. So William McKinley is assassinated, Theodore Roosevelt becomes president, and then William McKinley's like, avenge me by killing my vice president. Now, in addition to being McKinley's vice president, so when McKinley was assassinated, Roosevelt became president, and he ran for a second term and won it in 1904. Now, there's something now it's law. So now in America, if you are president, you can only be president for 2 terms. You can't serve a third term. That was not always the case. For many, many years, up until like really right after sort of World War II, or around the end of World War II, there was no official limit on how many times you could be president. What there was a gentleman's agreement that George Washington, first president, had only served 2 terms. And ever since that point, it had been considered the polite thing to do was just to serve 2 terms, if you got elected for 2 terms, and then to, bow out gracefully. So when it came to Teddy Roosevelt, since he'd served 1 term on his own and he'd finished up McKinley's term. So there was a bit of a debate when it ended where people went, you'd probably be okay with serving another term since you just finished up McKinley's. But he'd at first been like, you know what? I'm going to, follow the example Washington set. I'm going to, do my own, just the 2 terms. So in 1908, instead of running for a 3rd term, Teddy Roosevelt helped his fellow Republican Taft win. So he ensures that it's still a Republican president, but he doesn't run himself. However, one of the reasons he did this is that Roosevelt was very much believed that he was going to be able to like manipulate Taft. The sort of plan was he kind of groomed Taft to be his like stand-in. So the idea was like, oh, I'm not president, when, you know, he wanted Taft to do everything that Roosevelt would have done. Taft, of course, you know, is like, hey, I'm president, I'm going to do my own thing. And Roosevelt's not too happy with that. So in 1912, Roosevelt decides that he wants back in. He wants to be president. He'd served 2 terms, he'd been out for a term, and he wants to go back in. The Republican Party does not pick him, though, because if you're a political party and your president can run for another term, you support them even if they're a horrible president. You know, it's super rare that, like, if, you know, there's a person in office, he's not going to try and run again. So when the Republicans don't pick Roosevelt, they decide to go with Taft. Roosevelt's like, fine, you won't let me be the candidate for your party. I'm going to form my own party. So he forms an independent third party. It's a party that's a Republican third party called the Progressive Party, also known as the Bull Moose Party. He was sort of known as the Bull Moose being a male moose. So when this assassination attempt happens, Roosevelt is campaigning. He's on the campaign trail. He's giving speeches trying to get elected. And Schrank shoots him when he's preparing to give a speech in Milwaukee. The bullet went through Roosevelt's steel eyeglass case, which is down here. It tore through the 50 pages of his speech, which had been folded in half, and then lodged in his chest. So all of this was in like a front pocket of his suit. It goes through all of that and goes into his chest because he's had a speech. It's not point blank range, but it's very, very close. Roosevelt's secretary tackles Scheck. The secretary was a guy, by the way, and gets his gun. Several other policemen join in. But Roosevelt, he sort of like stumbled over when he got shot. He gets up, basically tells the crowd, leave him alone, don't try and kill him, and goes on to deliver his speech. And the speech starts with, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know whether you fully understand that I've just been shot, but it takes more than that to kill a bull moose. Roosevelt was a very experienced outdoorsman. He had been a soldier. He had fought in the Battle of San Juan Hill in the Spanish-American War. So he realized when he didn't start coughing up blood, he's like, okay, that bullet's not in my lungs. I'll be fine to give this speech. And he gave his speech. 84 minutes later, after delivering his speech, he finally accepted medical attention. And this is a X-ray that was taken of him. So again, it had torn through his eyeglass case, his speech, and into his chest. This is his shirt here. And then the bullet is like right here, lodged right in his chest. So Schrank is declared insane and sentenced to a mental hospital because, again, he believed that he'd been told by the ghost of William McKinley to kill Roosevelt. So he died there 29 years later. And Roosevelt only spent 2 weeks resting before he returned to the campaign trail and carried the bullet in his chest for the rest of his life. The decision was made, it's not hurting him, it's just there. He once remarked, I do not mind it any more than if it were in my waistcoat pocket. So he went through the rest of his life with this bullet lodged in his chest, and he had a fairly long life after this point. He did, however, lose the 1912 election to Woodrow Wilson because third-party candidates never win. It's perfectly fine if you want to support a third-party candidate, but with the current setup of American government, the president is always going to be either a Democrat or a Republican. You're not going to have a third-party candidate win. Roosevelt pretty much came the closest that anyone ever has, and he's still lost by a whole bunch. He got the highest share of a popular vote by any third-party candidate. The problem is, of course, he's getting that share from the Republican Party. So that leads to Woodrow Wilson, who's going to be the president during World War I, who is fondly remembered despite being a racist butthole. But that's not the topic for today's assignment. So, failed assassin! Yay! Huzzah! We finally managed to fail through, just kind of sheer dumb luck, really. Yeah, so really quickly, let me do a little really quick. So, America has many political parties, but when it basically when it gets to the national level, so president, Congress, Senate, which is part of Congress, the only people who really win are Democrats or Republicans. The reason for this is kind of what actually goes back to Washington. George Washington had not really had a political party. He'd been elected president because he'd been super popular. He'd been kind of leading the country already through the Revolutionary War. Washington was actually really against political parties. But, right after he goes out, because he was kind of universally popular, right after he goes out, the political parties start based on who's the president and who's not the president. It forms with president and the president's party and those in opposition. And due to the way, specifically the Electoral College, which is a whole bundle of mess and I hate it and I wish it would go away, it's just not really popular. It's just not really possible for a third party. Think of it like if someone's holding a vote, like on Twitch, if you're following someone who does votes on like what game they should play next. If, there's two really popular choices, you're not going to be able to get that third part to win. And what happens in America is that our smaller parties, the parties that are not Democrat, they're not Republican, they tend to align themselves. So it's one of those kind of like, think of it as, if you're a member of the Green Party and there's not a Green Party person running for that position, you're going to vote Democrat because they're most similar to you. Usually. Some of this depends. So everyone votes for the big parties. That's not the best explanation, but the better explanation takes a bit more time. But yeah, third party candidates, unless something drastically changes in U.S. history, which, I think if third party candidates wanted a chance at the presidency, we would have to, at the very least, get rid of the Electoral College system because it really heavily favors a two-party candidate, and potentially go with something like ranked voting like Australia has. But that's more political. Yeah, American politics. Sorry. I had a bit of a mind tick up there because I forgot. Oh yeah, nothing really happens for a long time. So obviously, presidents between Teddy Roosevelt and, the next guy that we're going to do, which is JFK, there were assassination attempts, but the next one we're going to talk about is our last presidential assassination. We'll have one more attempted assassination after this. And this is, of course, the big one. People are definitely, people are aware of Lincoln. People probably might have forgotten Garfield and McKinley if they're not kind of a history nerd. But, everyone kind of knows JFK. So John F. Kennedy, JFK, the 35th president of the United States, who was assassinated 3 years into his first term, so right toward the end of his first term as president, while he was getting prepared to campaign for another term. And his assassin, of course, is Lee Harvey Oswald, who was killed by Jack Ruby 2 days after assassinating the president. We're going to be talking about Oswald later. Now, this is all happening, fall of 1963. President Kennedy is super, super popular. Probably our most popular president, at least in common sort of perception of the presidents, maybe not in actual terms of numbers. But he's very, very popular. He was the youngest elected president. I think Roosevelt had been younger, but again, Roosevelt had come in through assassination. And on November 22nd, 1963, he is traveling to Dallas, Texas. He's there in order to smooth over frictions in the Democratic Party. The Democrats of Texas were having some fighting among themselves. He's there to be like, hey, everyone, play nice. Let's, be a happy Democratic Party together. The trip had been announced in September. Just like nowadays, we tend to know ahead of time, where the president is going with a little less certainty than we would have in like previous times. And obviously with Secret Service and stuff in attendance. He expects to not really get a warm welcome. Texas is, as today, largely conservative and Republican, even more so kind of back then. But there are crowds waiting at the airport and just lining the streets along his route. This is a photograph taken shortly after Kennedy and his wife, Jackie, arrived. You can see she's got a bunch of flowers. We got the vice president in the background there. So he gets into an open-air limousine, and again, the sort of history of presidential assassinations being stuff that in hindsight is like, maybe don't put your president in an open air limousine. They're sitting, so there's the president, there's his wife. This gentleman right here is Texas Governor John Connally, and sort of behind this little thing here is his wife Nellie. So this was a convertible limousine. It had a top that could be put on in case of rain. The top was also at least mildly bulletproof. I haven't seen specifics on how bulletproof it was. But he liked to ride without the top up. He liked to he was a very charismatic president. He liked to be able to be seen by, people. So they get into this limo. They're headed to the Dallas Market Center for a meeting with civic and business leaders. But the route isn't a direct one. So again, Kennedy, more so than a lot of other presidents, is really focused on perception, on image, on being seen, on seeing the common person. So the route they choose is purposefully meandering in order to give the president maximum exposure to the local crowds. He really wants to be out and about and be seen. So here is our little map with current day. So this was what was published in the newspapers at the time, telling you, hey, you want to see the president, here's where you can go to go see him. And here is the route as it's mapped out over Dallas. So they're going down this route. Everything's going nice and wonderful and lovely. The governor's wife, at one point yells out, "Mr. President, you can't say that Dallas doesn't love you." "No, you certainly can't," JFK responds, because again, enthusiastic, just lining the streets. You can see in sort of the backgrounds of this. And then at 12:30 p.m., the motorcade enters Dealey Plaza and passes by this building here, the Texas School Book Depository. So it's a big warehouse where school books are being kept, or textbooks of various kinds. 3 shots are fired. 1 shot misses. 1 shot hits JFK in the base of the back of his neck and goes on to hit Governor Connally. We'll look at that shot more specifically in a few moments. And 1 shot hits the back of JFK's head. This is instantly, everyone knows what's happening. Instantly, people know that this is very, very bad. The limousine races off to the closest hospital, Parkland Hospital. But upon arrival, JFK is what's called moribund. He has no chance of survival. So again, it's a matter of trying to make him comfortable. JFK is Catholic, so there was an element of ensuring that he got, last rites. But he is pronounced dead at 1 p.m. At 1:30 p.m., the announcement that the president has died is made to the press. And at 2 p.m., JFK's body is taken back to the airport and put back on Air Force One. Technically, this is illegal. By the laws of Texas, the body should have stayed in Texas until an investigation could have been pursued. But he's the president. They're kind of like, ugh. And since then, there have been various laws made that allow, the president's body to be moved. On Air Force One, as it is sitting on the tarmac before taking off, Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson is sworn in as the 36th President of the United States. At that point, Air Force One takes off with the coffin was put into a back sort of bedroom area and heads back to Washington, D.C., where his body is taken to the Bethesda Naval Hospital for autopsy. This is a really famous image of that swearing in. So we have Lyndon B. Johnson here, who is Vice President, being sworn in. You're supposed to be sworn in on a Bible. They actually didn't really have a Bible. They had, I'm forgetting what it was, but it's something else. It's like a Catholic Book of Hours, I think, maybe. And so I think in the back over here, but it might be the other side, is where that, where the bedroom, where the casket is laid out is. And of course, this is JFK's wife standing right there. And throughout all of this is upon arrival in Washington, D.C., she's still wearing the outfit she'd been wearing when he was shot, which actually has his blood. So you can't see it. That's apparently actually, I've heard things saying there's a reason why they never published this photo in color, even though it was taken. And the reason for that being that you can see the blood that's more common, that's most visible in this shot right here. So JFK is, laid in state, and the public are allowed to view his casket. And on November 25th, a funeral mass is held at St. Matthew's Cathedral, and he is laid to rest in Arlington National Cemetery. he had visited the cemetery exactly 2 weeks before he was buried in observance of Veterans Day. So this is JFK's grave right now, which has an eternal flame, so eternally burning fire there. So, and of course the very famous, let's see if this video will actually work, because sometimes it doesn't want to work. The very famous, of course, is JFK. I'm not going to bother going to the website. I'll just gesture at it in a second. Work, you computer. So JFK had very young children. So he had a daughter and a very young son. And the most famous image of his assassination is his son saluting the casket, and was later on interviewed and was like, I didn't know what I was doing. They just sort of told me to do this. So the president is dead, but there's a big conspiracy about it. We'll get into some of the reasons for the conspiracy in a second. But November 29th, 1963, President Lyndon B. Johnson ordered that a committee be formed to investigate the assassination of JFK. Mostly because, assassination on the first hand, but also because the assassin died, as we're going to talk about. The assassin himself was assassinated. Officially, this is the President's Commission on the Assassination of President Kennedy, but unofficially it's known as the Warren Commission, after the chairman, Chief Justice Earl Warren. It is this mammoth study that is released, published. It's 888-page volume, 20-page report, 26 volumes. It is super in-depth, and I will guarantee you that most people who think that the JFK assassination was a conspiracy have not read these books, have not read the actual supporting materials. So let's look at the assassin. So the assassin is a guy by the name of Lee Harvey Oswald, who, as I mentioned in King's stream yesterday, I think looks a little like King. Lee Harvey Oswald had joined the U.S. Marine Corps at age 17 in 1956. And in December, he had scored a 212 on a shooting test, giving him the designation of a sharpshooter. So he's not quite a sniper, but he is very accomplished. While in the Marines, he had taught himself some Russian. In 1959, he's discharged from active service in order to take care of his mother, who was elderly and sick at the time. However, he leaves her in Fort Worth on September 20th and starts making his way to the USSR. Remember, at this point, the Cold War is ongoing, so that's a pretty big, what the heck are you doing, man? He got in via a tourist visa on October 16th, and they denied him citizenship, so he injured himself and convinced them to stay. So it was one of those, he arrives in the USSR, he's like, hey, I want to join you up. They're like, we don't really want you, you're kind of just a useless dude. They wanted, defecting scientists or defecting high-level military people who could bring them information. But he hurts himself and eventually is able to stay. He ends up working just like a very common factory job in a place called Minsk. And the USSR gave him a fully furnished studio apartment and supplemented his pay, so he lived very comfortably. He was having a good life, kind of, on the government's dime. But by January of 1961, he was reconsidering if he wanted to stay in the USSR. He was like, yeah, I've got a comfortable life, but I think he kind of had this idea that he was going to be a big shot in Russia, and he wasn't. So he married after knowing Maria Puskarova. I'm probably mangling her last name. He only had known her for a month, but he married her, and they had a baby daughter within the next year, and pretty soon after that, they returned to the United States. And he'd started working at the Texas School Book Depository. Oswald's this really interesting guy in that he kind of seemed to very much just kind of drift through life, wanting desperately to be important, but not really having anything to make him important. I'm going to pop on my lights. It's getting dark. There we go. Let there be lights. So, when he shoots at Kennedy, he shoots from the 6th floor of the book depository, and he's working there. And he flees. And in the confusion, in the fact that, this is the first time a president had been assassinated, not, up close and personal, but from a distance, he manages to get past the cops while on the run, because they did get a description. Why are you grumpy? You don't like me talking about Oswald? Grumpy cat. You gonna stop being grumpy or no? watch. He's not going to be able to sit there for long before he wants to go. So he flees, but there's a description of him out and about. People were like, yeah, Oswald was here before this happened. Where'd he go? Why did he go home? What's happening? It's a little sus that he went home right after the president was killed. So he is eventually arrested after killing a policeman, and he's taken to Dallas Police Headquarters, where he kind of gets to have that celebrity he'd always wanted. This is an image of him when he was arrested. He fled into a movie theater to try and hide. He's interrogated for 2 days while in the custody. They don't send him to a jail or anything. They're just keeping him in police headquarters, trying to interrogate him. He didn't really say much. He was kind of being coy. Hello, Hitsun. Yeah, life gets active. I'll talk about that sort of at the end of the stream, possibly. But yeah, we're talking about assassins. We've talked about a whole bunch so far. We're gonna finish up JFK and then talk about one more attempted assassination. So he's being held in the police station, and as they're holding him and interrogating him, everyone knows that's where this guy is. Everyone knows the guy that they're pretty sure killed JFK is in this police station. So November 24th, as detectives are escorting him out to take him to the county jail, a man by the name of Jack Ruby shoots and kills him. And there's actually footage of that. Life has been interesting, yes. 2020/2021 is the time of life being interesting. So I'm going to play this. It's not graphic. It's one of those, if you watch this and didn't know it was a guy being killed, you probably may not actually notice it. So this is, again, so at this point in this clip, they're going to bring Oswald out. He's going to be handcuffed to, I think it's like a Texas Ranger or something like that. They're taking him to jail to await trial and all that. So they finally have given up on interrogating him, and they're going to take him to that. So let's...
Here he comes. Now the prisoner wearing a white spider is changed.
So you can see Oswald right here. He is handcuffed to this gentleman there. Actual news footage.
Being let out by Captain Fritz. There is a prisoner. There is Lee.
He's been shot. He's been shot. Lee Oswald has been shot. There's a man with a gun. It's absolute panic. Absolute panic here in the basement of Dallas Police Headquarters.
So this is Lee Harvey Oswald being shot by Jack Ruby and the sort of immediate aftermath. So I'm going to go back a sec if I can. So Oswald is being taken out. He's being taken out. There's this crowd of reporters and police officers and stuff. There's a police car over here. They're going to take him to jail. Now, amidst those reporters was a guy by the name of Jack Ruby, who we're going to talk about in a second. And it's not the best angle, but you can see, like, if I can actually get it to pause right there, which it won't, it'll go back one slide. But, like, you can sort of see this guy darting out and shooting him. And the moment was captured. This is another angle, because there's a lot of reporters around there. So he just sort of, amidst this crowd of people, darts out. He's got a gun in his hand. He's shooting, very, very close. And this is the really famous image with the officer here making a whole bunch of unfortunate faces in this image, to be quite clear. So Lee Harvey Oswald is shot. He dies of this. And this is what really, I think, the biggest thing that makes this people think there's a conspiracy is the fact that he dies so suddenly and so ridiculously. So, okay, this sort of leads to, 3 big questions about the JFK assassination. Why did Lee Harvey Oswald shoot JFK? What the hell? Who is Jack Ruby? And why did Jack Ruby shoot Oswald? So let's do some sort of quick answers. Why did Lee Harvey Oswald shoot JFK? We don't know. There might not actually be like a real reason or even like a satisfying reason. The findings of the Warren Commission was that, so I think this is a really great sort of way of phrasing it. Yeah, we'll talk about Ruby in a second. So Oswald, I like the way they phrase this. Oswald seemed to be seeking for himself a place in history, a role as the great man who would be recognized as having been in advance at the times. So Oswald he wanted to be someone important. He was a nobody from nowhere with nothing special about him, just like everyday, average, ordinary sort of guy. And kind of everything he'd done in his life was trying to stand out from the crowd. Joining the military, that he, this sort of very typical like idea of I'm going to join the military and be this big damn hero. But he wasn't horrible, but he wasn't anything special. Then, he tries to defect to Russia, thinking, I'm going to be in advance of the times. Look at me. I liked communism before it was cool. But he's disappointed in that, where they're just like kind of, okay, coming back. Oswald was a Trump without money. I kind of like that. He's just, everything that drove him was he wanted to be in the books. He wanted to be remembered. So, a lot of it was, he's trying to do something that's going to get him remembered. And it's very hard because he didn't really have like a diary, didn't really have writings, so we can't quite look back on it. And there's a big question of how much, was he ever really pro-communist, or was it just him trying to be famous? How much was actual his belief and how much was he's trying to get a name for himself? So it really kind of just boils down to, if there is a reason, it's a really unsatisfying one. It's not like he probably had something mentally going on, but it's not like he was completely crazy like some of these other assassins we've looked at. It's not like, it's really just kind of a sad, pathetic, like, you wanted to be known. It's the same mentality that you'll see, the big mentality you see, like, think of like the stuff they talk about, how the news's attention on school shootings inspires more school shootings. I think Oswald had like a very much that kind of mentality. This idea of, he's tried all this other stuff to try and get famous. If he kills someone, maybe he'll finally be famous. And that's a mentality we're going to see in the last attempted assassination we'll talk about as well, although that one has more mental stuff. So, again, quick answer. We don't know. There's kind of not a reason. The closest we have to a reason is he wanted to be somebody. So, next, of course, who the hell is Jack Ruby? Jack Ruby owned a nightclub / strip club in Dallas, and he may have had some connection to the mob. But that's a really big may. He more than likely just liked to pretend that he had connections. Sort of like the various, the stuff that sort of indicates he has mob connections are very much like someone kind of play acting as like a mobster. Or like, saying things like, that sort of thing. Did I freeze, or is my computer just being a weirdo? Computer. I don't know if my computer just weirded out for you guys, as it weirded out for me. As I may have mentioned at some various points, my computer is a laptop, and not even a gaming laptop, and not good. Hopefully I'm back. Hopefully that wasn't horrible. Yeah, he's very much, there was mob involvement in, like, a lot of nightclub stuff at the time, but anything, he would have been a hanger-on. Hopefully I'm back. Every now and then my computer just decides to freak out, and usually it doesn't happen, but every now and then it does. So yeah, so I get the feeling from a lot of the stuff I've read that the accounts of him being a mob guy were based off of, like, someone tried to walk out on his, like, on a bill, and he claimed, like, he'd be like, I'm gonna send the mob after you. So he pretended, he tried to play act, but he probably was not actually a member of the mob. And that's about it. The big problem with the JFK assassination is a lot of this is, like, really unsatisfying. Humans, we really like there to be some grand big thing and some, like, ooh moment, but a lot of it wasn't that way. So Jack Ruby, if you take away the fact that he shot Oswald, he's a complete nobody. So why did he shoot Oswald? He was upset about JFK's death, and he had an opportunity. And this is something that could have easily happened in kind of any other assassination. Like John Wilkes Booth was legitimately... So John Wilkes Booth, when he fled, he was being pursued by soldiers. Those soldiers were under orders not to shoot him, but they did anyway. But that's not a conspiracy. The various other assassins, the guy that killed Garfield, the guy that killed McKinley, there were attempts to kill those people, like between the arrest and the trial and even during their trials, but they were unsuccessful. It's just the fact that the Dallas police kind of fucked up and gave Jack Ruby the opportunity to be close enough. Because Jack Ruby was kind of like, I've seen some accounts that he would like give police officers like discounts and stuff, to sort of be like encouraging them to be around in case stuff happened. So he had an opportunity. He was upset over JFK's death, and he decided to kill Oswald. Ruby himself admitted later on that it was spur of the moment. That he was in the right place at the right time. He had a gun that he owned, as, he would very commonly be like depositing large amounts of money or have large amounts of money on him for his club. So he had a gun for kind of that purpose. And he's just like, hey, I'm gonna shoot this guy. So let's talk the fun part of the JFK assassination, which is conspiracy theories. So a whole bunch of conspiracy theories essentially boil down to, insert name here of a person or an organization knew that it was going to happen. Usually because they also think that, either Oswald didn't work alone, that he was framed, that Ruby got orders from somewhere or someone. There's really no credible evidence. A lot of people will cite evidence for conspiracy theories, but a lot of it is like you think of like QAnon, how many people believe in QAnon, despite how many times QAnon has been wrong, and you get the understanding of why that. Oh, I don't know, isn't it like a scaly if it's like a reptile furry? But yeah, no credible evidence has ever come to light showing that anyone knew Oswald was going to shoot JFK, that anyone ever worked with Oswald, or that Oswald was framed. There's no evidence there were other gunmen, and there's no evidence that Ruby had orders or was connected to anyone. And your initial reaction might be, well, I've heard people say there's evidence. Again, that's kind of the nice thing about QAnon, is if you don't believe in QAnon, I can point to it and be like, this is how, crazy people are. But let's sort of look at some of the more convincing to a people evidence that there is. And again, evidence. It was not a conspiracy. I'll talk more about this in a sec. But one of the most famous conspiracies... Yeah, and an awful lot of conspiracies. So many conspiracies are anti-Semitic. So many conspiracies are anti-Semitic. It's like... It gets to the point where if you're at all like I'm interested in conspiracy theories in a like, ooh, look at the crazy sort of way. And it gets to the point where when a conspiracy theory isn't anti-Semitic, you're like, whoa, what the heck? But yeah, so many conspiracy theories, both JFK and also others, are connected to, the Jews or various things like that. One of the most well-known conspiracy theories is called either the magic bullet or the single bullet conspiracy theory, and they're actually referring to one specific bullet, the bullet on this screen over here. So this bullet right here is a side view, here is a top-down view. Well, yeah. Oh gosh, I'm forgetting. It's been a while since I did it. Yeah, propaganda. Become a furry to support your page. Oh god, yeah, the dog one. Oh my gosh. It's been a long time since then. That's still up on my YouTube, I think. So, the magic bullet is one bullet hit both JFK and Governor Connolly. This is the bullet that hit JFK in like the sort of shoulder area. And this bullet, it had gone through JFK's neck, through the governor's chest, into the governor's wrist, and ended up in his thigh. And if you just hear that list of injuries, your brain might be like, wait, how the heck does it do that? So people who believe in this conspiracy theory don't think that the injuries line up. And you'll see stuff like this. So these are both visuals from conspiracy theory people. Showing, oh, it's a magic bullet because it changes. So this is kind of convincing. If you just like say like, okay, yeah, if they're sitting like this, how does it line up? The big thing is they don't know, they're relying upon false information. So they hear that, Kennedy and Connolly were sitting in 2 rows of a car, and they think that they were, sitting like that, right in front of each other, But the thing is, we've got a lot of pictures of this. We have video of this incident. We have, the car is probably still in a museum somewhere. If not, there's similar ones. So, again, this is what the conspiracy theories would have you say. However, if you look at the actual layout of the car, things become really clear. Because this was not how they were sitting. So it's based off of misunderstanding. Kennedy and Connolly were not sitting directly in front of each other. Okay? The conspiracy theorists think that they're sitting, right in front of each other, like in a line, same level. They weren't at an equal height. And if you position them the correct way, so if you look at the actual car and look at where they were sitting, it becomes very apparent. So this is what all the conspiracy theorists will tell you. They'll be like, hey, the bullet changed directions. No. So here, again, bottom is conspiracy theory view. Top is based off of the actual view. Connolly was sitting in like a little kind of weird seat. So first off, it's not like this, it's like this. Connolly is lower than JFK. And then instead of being directly in front of each other, they're offset. So when you put them, there's an overhead view. When you put them in the right position, all the injuries line up. When you look at, from actual footage of this incident happening, when you look at the actual car, the way it's laid out, you can see there's a difference in height. So Kennedy is sitting higher in the car than Connolly. And there's a difference in where they are in front of each other. They're offset just enough that that becomes a straight line. I think it's because a lot of them will stake their claim. So, like, for example, the magic bullet theory, if you just hear it, like how the conspiracy theories say, it's a very nice, like, snappy, like going, it doesn't line up, is very simplistic. And the fact that it's, like, so easily disproven, a lot of people just won't even, they won't even acknowledge this. They'll just kind of brush it off. It's kind of like, again, if you ask a QAnon, what about all the times that QAnon has been wrong? They'll just be like, I don't know, insert reason here. Yeah. People fail at using their brain. I have a little bit of an explanation for this. This is, so several years ago, I did this thing called there's this thing called the Johnson O'Connor Institute. And it's based off, this guy had this theory that, people have aptitudes. People have certain ththings they're good at, and there's a wide variety. And he thought that if you found a job that worked for you, the aptitudes you were good at, you would enjoy your job. My mother had, so it's essentially you do all these testing to see, like, do you have spatial visual skills? Do you have logic skills, etc.? And I'm forgetting one of the skills that they said I had was one where it's essentially you can connect data. But the problem is that if you don't have a certain level of intelligence, if you don't have, like, the facts, you connect data in the wrong ways. So I think a lot of it is they're seeing connections, but then they're not, like, checking their sources. Probably, I haven't really been in an SUV recently, but yeah, so it's an elevated seat because, people are there to see Kennedy. So think of it like if you're, this is a parade route car. It's a car specifically designed for taking Kennedy out and about, and people want to see the president. So if you're at the same level as the governor, that's not as cool. So that's why. So yeah, he's elevated. You can see, like, the butt, where the butts are. And there's, you can find, like, sort of good, like, moving images and stuff, like, of this on the internet. So the magic bullet theory is really easy to disprove if you just look at footage of the car, stuff like that. The sort of next thing that features in a lot of conspiracy theories is the Zapruder film. So the Zapruder film is a short home movie, because people were, filming this with, actually this is the camera that was filmed with. It's a film that provides the most clear view of the assassination. There's several cameras that provided some parts of a view, but this one provides the best view just due to where it was shot from. It was shot by a man named Abraham Zapruder with his home movie camera. It has no sound because this is still fairly early in, home movie cameras, and it's only a minute long. I'm going to play it for you now. A bit more graphic. I actually have to go to YouTube in order to watch this. A bit more graphic, but the footage is very much very grainy, so it's a little hard. There is a moment in this film where a guy is hit in the head by a bullet, but again, the footage level is not too graphic. So I'll say when I'm not playing this anymore if you do not wish to watch it. And I understand that completely. So again, this is the Zapruder film. There is no sound. I think they put music in, which I'm going to mute. See, the guy probably had sex with Marilyn Monroe. I'm pretty sure he did have sex. I mean, there's been a lot of presidents that cheated on their wives. There's been a lot of people that cheated on their wives. So the little thing at the beginning here, the Zapruder film, the guy, offered it to the government because he realized really quickly what he had. And he had a copy of it, which he sold to Life magazine. Life magazine damaged a few frames. So for a long time, these frames, they damaged them while copying them. So for a long time, these frames were not found. So again, this does show both the first shot missed, the second and third shot can be seen happening in this film. So there is, people getting shot and a shot that ended up killing someone's life. So I'm going to be pausing this a few times. So we have here, the presidential motorcade. It's coming around this corner into Dealey Plaza. Zapruder is on what's called the grassy knoll. I will talk more about in a second. So the book depository is kind of up off this way-ish. And let's see if I can remember exactly when things. So I believe the first shot that misses, I think, happens while it's going behind this sign. And then shortly after that, the second and third shot are going to happen. So the second shot has happened, the third shot is about to happen. And that's the third shot. So if I remember correctly, first shot happens somewhere in here. As they are passing behind this, it's a roadway sign, a freeway, the second shot happens and you can see JFK kind of in this kind of position, which is he's reacting to, that's the bullet that had gone through like his shoulders. So you can see here that, he's reacting, the person in the front is, and then of course it's going to end with the third shot, which is the shot that hits him in the head, the shot that eventually kills him. The accounts I've seen say that he would have survived if he hadn't been hit by the third shot, which is the most dramatic shot of the thing. But even in this footage, like if you examine this footage, which conspiracy theorists really like to do, you can tell a little bit of the layout of the cars. And of course, the really sad part here, what Jacqueline Kennedy is doing, that third shot blew a chunk of his brain out, and the brain went tumbling backwards. She's trying to grab it because, essentially, acting on panic and trying to grab it, and the car speeds up. So, pause that and get back to my slides. So this is like the big, this is what the conspiracy theories love. And there's no sound. Like, I didn't play any sound because the person, I think, had added in some, random music, but there's no sound because it's a home movie. You can clearly tell when Kennedy was shot in the film. And the big thing from this film, sorry, 1 second. I have to answer a text message. Yeah, I've seen a few different, Yeah, people like to claim that she's like reaching for a bullet. She's reaching for a part of her husband's brain that she actually like grabbed on. I think she gave it to the doctors later. Because again, her husband, whom, despite the fact that yeah, JFK cheated on her, they seem to generally care for each other, and definitely hit. You've come, hello Breezy. You've come just as we're talking about presidents getting shot in the head. Welcome to history class. So sorry about that. I had to have had someone asking me if I need anything from groceries. I'm like, no, I'm good. So the big thing in that footage is when JFK is shot in the head, there's the explosion that, if it was a high quality film, would, be pretty darn gory. In the shot, people think that JFK's head moves back and to the left. So they think it moves, diagonally like that. And because of that, again, this is kind of like, basic. They think he's getting hit from the front right. They think, oh, you hit someone. Like, if I slapped you, you're gonna, like, if I slap you, you're gonna go in the, away from the slap. So they think the same thing's happening from the bullet. So the Zapruder film leads to this grassy knoll theory. So the grassy knoll, which is this location, I should throw in a picture. I forgot to throw a picture. Dealey Plaza is like a big, like, you can get on the freeway, so there's this like big grassy area. A knoll is a little hill. So the area that's to the front right of JFK at the point that he was shot is called the grassy knoll. And the conspiracy theory is that there was a second gunman. So people believe that there was a second gunman on or near the grassy knoll. This shows up a lot. For example, like the one that comes to mind just off the top of my head, in Watchmen, in the opening little thing of Watchmen, where they're, to the opening musical credits of Watchmen, there's a bit where it's implied that the comedian was the guy shooting at the grassy knoll. I think there's something that implies that when it comes to X-Men Days of Future Past. The X-Men where Magneto, there's one of the X-Men, it's like the X-Men First Class sequel where Magneto's like imprisoned, and it refers to that as well. So the second gunman theory, or the grassy knoll theory, is the theory that there was a second person. So this is a theory that, yes, Oswald shot, but then there was someone else shooting from the other side. And the thing they point to is specifically this. Like, there's a very sort of memeable moment from a movie about this, back and to the left. So the idea being, it's coming from the front. The problem about this is that this is not actually how a bullet interacts with a skull. So the very easy way of disproving this is shown here in this clip from Penn and Teller that I adore. So let's let them explain it.
The 1-inch wide tape is the skull for our melon. Dr. Louis explained that a bullet penetrating a skull doesn't transfer much of its energy to the head. It's a tiny hole, slides right in. The brain doesn't present much resistance, and when the bullet pops out the other side, it pulls a lot of brain, or in this case, melon goo, with it. The bullet and goo make a little jet blast that pushes the melon head in the opposite direction. Watch. The bullet and goo make a little jet blast that pushes the melon head in the opposite direction.
So, yeah, it's one of those, again, that this kind of, it makes sense for conspiracy theories, that you think, oh, if you're getting, because if you get hit, if you get punched, if you get slapped, you're going to react, you're going to go in the opposite direction of that slap. If someone slaps me, I'm going to go with it. So it kind of makes sense that you might think the same thing happens with a bullet. But you have to realize, our noggins are pretty tough. So as they're talking about, it punches through easily, but then it pulls the head back with it. So it's more the head getting pulled with the bullet than anything else. But people will do that. There's a few other things that are support the second gunman conspiracy. The biggest one being people claiming that that he wasn't that good a shot, that he couldn't have shot the gun in that quick a time frame, when he was a very decent shot. He got good marks on his scoring stuff. He was a decent shot with a little bit of luck, pretty much. People have fired that gun. Yeah, there's time to fire that gun if you know what you're doing, sort of thing. So really, a lot of it just boils down to there was no damn conspiracy. There was no conspiracy. It was just sort of stupidity and stupid luck. And pretty much, if you want to argue that there was a conspiracy, cool. But before you argue there was a conspiracy, you're going to have to, like, at the very least, read the Warren Commission's report, which is massive and very, very dull and time-consuming. Or if you want to take the slightly less approach, / if you're just interested in general, highly recommend this book, Claiming History, The Assassination of President John F. Kennedy, by a man named Vincent Bugliosi. He is the guy that also wrote Helter Skelter, which is like the definitive book on the Marilyn Manson murders. This book is amazing. This book walks through like the entire background of Oswald, the entire background of Ruby, goes through like moment by moment the entire assassination. It's like this thick. It's like a big chonkin book, but highly recommend. I actually have a copy of it that all my books are in storage right now, or else I'd bring it out and wave it around. But the big problem is a lot of these conspiracy theory people that believe this conspiracy theory, if they've done any research on their own, they've only read conspiracy theory books. And a lot of those books came out at a time where not that many copies of this were actually printed. And the first kind of commercially available printing of the Warren assassination was a shortened version that was made by someone who supported a conspiracy. So, yeah, like a lot of conspiracies, once you actually try and find evidence, it falls apart. It does. Like, it's like literally like the book, if I remember correctly, about like that big and like that thick. So I wish I had it, but it's in one of my boxes with all my other books because of the location I'm at in a moment, which I'll talk about at the end of the stream. So with that, we're going to talk about one last assassination, and that is attempted assassination. We're going to talk about the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan. So Ronald Reagan was the 40th president of the United States. Unfortunately, he was California governor beforehand, so California is at least partially to blame. He used to be my least favorite president. I'm pretty sure you can guess who my least favorite president is now. And in 1981, 9 years before I was born, he survived an assassination attempt by this man down here, John Hinckley Jr. And this is a heck of a ride that we're going to get into. Because John Hinckley Jr. thought that if he assassinated the president, he would impress the actress Jodie Foster. If you, like me, are not the best with names, Jodie Foster is the woman who played Clarice Starling in The Silence of the Lambs. We are not counting the shoe throwing at Bush. We also left out a few other kind of semi-notable attacks. For example, I'm forgetting, I think it was Johnson. There was like a Manson family member that tried to kill Johnson, but when I got to this point in the slides, I was like, I have made entirely too many slides. Let's just wrap it up here. The actress who played Clarice Starling in The Silence of the Lambs, John Hinckley Jr. was mad about her. He had become obsessed with Foster after watching Taxi Driver, in which a very young Foster plays like a child prostitute. He started stalking her when she was attending Yale College. He slipped poems and messages under a door, repeatedly called her. I think there's like places like on YouTube you can probably find, like, she had recorded like a call between her and him once, which is like just grade A, like, creeper material. So he was obsessed with Jodie Foster. And understandably, he had mental issues, like many of the guys we've talked about. So he was obsessed with Jodie Foster. Yeah, Jodie Foster, no chance, quite literally. And the thing is, he knew he had no chance. So he started fantasizing about what he could do to give him a chance with her. So he thought about, like, committing an aircraft hijacking or committing suicide in order to get her attention. This is the male version of Notice Me Senpai, but with an actress who, she's very famously, like, never goddamn talked about this, and I don't blame her. If this was me, I would, like, never want to talk about it either. So, he thought that if he did something to make him a big, important person, if he did something to make him a national figure, he would be her equal and, I guess, get together with her? Again, crazy. Very kind of similar in some ways to Oswald of wanting to be noticed, just his is wanting to be noticed by a specific person, not just the world in general. So he had actually started stalking President Carter, who was before Reagan. So he was stalking Carter, but never actually tried to kill Carter. And then he started stalking Ronald Reagan when Ronald Reagan was in office. This was like really early in Reagan's first term. So I like how that image just took forever to load. On March 28th, John Hinckley Jr. is in Washington, D.C. Here's a picture of him at the White House. Here's a picture of him posing in front of Ford's Theater where Lincoln was killed. And he saw Reagan's schedule printed in a newspaper called the Washington Star and decided, you know what, I'm going to try and kill him. He knew he might get killed in the attempt, so he wrote but did not send a letter to Foster. And I think this is the text of the letter. This might be the text of a different letter that he sent to Foster. Over the past 7 months, I've left you dozens of poems, letters, and love messages in the faint hope that you could develop an interest in me. Although we talked on the phone a couple times, I never had the nerve to simply approach you and introduce myself. The reason I'm going ahead with this attempt now is because I cannot wait any longer to impress you. So yes, notice me, Jode-senpai, notice me. Like, giant creeper. So, and there's footage of this as well. So we're gonna, again, have to bop over to YouTube because it's age restricted. And we're gonna walk through exactly what happens, but let's just look at the footage first. Again, due to the angles of this, it is not graphic. So, yes, it is people getting shot. No one in this clip dies. This is a failed assassination attempt, but it is, so not graphic at all. And again, I'll be talking more off the video. And this is at a hotel in Washington, D.C. We'll talk about that, but Reagan had been giving a speech, so Reagan's about to come out.
Much sense, Henry. He puts you here and then he runs around with a big tongue. President Reagan!
Back up! Get him out! Get him out! Get him out! Get out, back! Get him out! No!
So there's footage, but it's a very bad angle. One thing, so in this footage, we'll see this in a picture I'm going to show in a second. The shooter is like just to the right of the guy filming this. This is just like a TV dude. You know, he's shooting B-roll of the president leaving, and you know the gun is like literally so close to the camera that you can hear when he starts shooting it, like blasts out the audio. And so everyone's piling up on the shooter over here. Meanwhile, while the cameras turn away, they're hustling Reagan into that limo, which you can see driving off in a moment. The people on the ground are not dead, by the way. So yeah, so Reagan is in that limo that's driving off. So let's go back to break down what exactly happened. So in that footage was being captured by this guy here with the camera. That's the assassin right there, circled in red, or the would-be assassin. So March 30th, Reagan gave a luncheon address at the Washington Hilton, and as he left, he walked by Hinckley. Well, the interesting thing about that is they were taking things seriously. They just literally had one mess up. Like, they accidentally allowed this group not to be searched. Like, there was actually like a thing where like the police would search first, and then as you got closer to Reagan, you'd get searched again by Secret Service. But there was this little gap where no one was searching this group, and the group was mostly reporters, so people didn't really think about it. But yeah, the Secret Service is a little bit slow to react. I assume they're a lot better now, just because we haven't had like even anything like to this level. Like this is kind of, at least as far as we know, this is the last like serious, like I say serious and like almost succeeded, and we'll see how close this almost succeeded in a second. So Reagan had given an address like business people, I think, and he's walking out, and we can see another angle here. So this is the VIP exit of this hotel. His car is waiting right here. He is walking across when he is shot by this group. So, you know, not a very far. Like that's just like, you know, if you just go across like if you're going from like your one side of the sidewalk to the other, that's how far this is. So Hinckley fired I forgot to look at how to say it. ROM RG-14. I don't know guns. There's the gun if you want to know what kind of gun it was. So fired this gun 6 times in 1.7 seconds. And the crazy thing about this is all 6 shots technically missed Reagan. I'll talk about that technically in a second. Considering how close Hinckley was to Reagan, that's insane. It gets more insane when we get into the technical. So the first shot hits White House Press Secretary James Brady above his left eye. He is left permanently disabled by that shot. He was, I believe, in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. And he died due to complications in 2014. So he survived that shooting. He's one of the people on the ground in that shot. He did survive, but eventually, medical complications. I mean, again, I don't like Reagan for many reasons. The biggest one being Reagan's response to the AIDS pandemic was just, if not for Trump's response to COVID, I don't know. Reagan's response to the AIDS pandemic might have been even worse than that. I haven't directly thought to compare the two. So the first shot misses Reagan, but does hit one of, because, the president moves with a bunch of other people. So hits the White House press secretary. There's actually a few newspapers and news reports at the time that said that he'd been killed, though he survived. The second shot hits a police officer, Thomas Delahanty. He is hit in the back of the neck. The bullet ricochets off his spinal cord but stays in his body. He suffered permanent nerve damage to his left arm that caused him to retire. He was actually a canine unit cop, but his dog was sick or something, so he'd volunteered to do this instead while his dog recovered. The third shot just missed entirely. The fourth shot hits a Secret Service agent by the name of Tim McCarthy in the chest. He made a full recovery. So, first 4 shots, 3 of them have hit. 1 did lead to the death of James Brody, but not until 2014. So, many years down the line from medical, because getting shot in the head is going to really mess you up. So, then we have the 5th shot. This is where it gets weird. So the 5th shot misses Reagan and hits the bullet-resistant glass on the window of the open rear door of the limo. So the door of the limo was open, it hits the glass on the interior, but does not hit anybody else. Yeah, what response? There was no response. Exactly. That's exactly. There was no response to the AIDS crisis. At least there was some response to COVID by Trump. Not that good one, but yeah. The 6th shot, though, the 6th shot is the insane shot. So all of these shots do not technically hit Reagan. But the 6th shot hits the side of the limo and bounces off and then passes between the open rear door and the window frame. So, you've got a door of a car and when the door of the car swings open, there's a little gap. That's what it goes through. So it bounces off and hits Reagan. So Reagan is hit. He is hit by a ricochet. Reagan is hit in the left underarm. It grazes a rib and lodges in his lung and stops less than an inch from his heart. So even though he's hit, but he's not hit in a way that makes any sense. It's crazy ricochet physics. So he at first doesn't even realize he's hit because he gets the Secret Service, at least in this, they tackled him. They were jump on top of the president, protect the president with your body. And they kind of had tackled him and then bundled him into the limo to get him out as soon as possible in case there were other people shooting. So they started driving back to the White House, because the White House is secure, when Reagan realizes he'd been hit. At first, he just thought that he'd cracked a rib, and then he starts coughing up blood, which is not a good sign. So, despite this, so they're en route to the White House. They make the decision that they're going to go to the nearest hotel, the nearest hospital. Reagan actually walks into the hospital without any help. They were supposed to bring out a gurney or a whatever for him, but he actually walked into the hospital without help. The trauma team started working on him. Reagan very famously said, "I hope you are all Republicans," to the doctors attending him, because he liked to joke. And they responded, one of them responded, "Today, Mr. President, we are all Republicans." And Reagan goes on to make a full recovery, which is, so it's kind of crazy at all that the bullet hit him, but then getting that bullet, that close to your heart, That's like, like this, that's ridiculous. So he makes a full recovery. No real long-term health complications. And if anything, the assassination actually helped Reagan out. He was more popular after the assassination than he was before it. But he never walked across an airport tarmac or got out of his limo on a public sidewalk again, so it made him afraid, definitely. And John Hinckley is taken to trial, and he is found not guilty by reason of insanity, which is, I think a good decision, because he was very clearly had some stuff wrong. And he had spent some time in like a mental hospital before for various depressive issues and stuff like that. However, this actually has a bad side effect in that it led to a lot of states rewriting their laws about the insanity defense. So there's changes that have been made to laws as a result of this, because they sort of felt that it was the wrong thing for him to get off the hook. Hinckley was confined to a mental hospital, but in 2006, he was allowed to start spending time out of the hospital at his mother's home. And in 2016, he left the hospital to live with his mother full time. So he is out and about. He is old. He's I want to say in his 50s or 60s. I can't remember exactly how old, but he is out of the mental hospital living with his mother now. So apparently has not since made an attempt to contact Jodie Foster. But again, Jodie Foster never talked about it. I don't blame her. Hinckley has never indicated publicly that he has any regrets about shooting Reagan. And shortly after he was found not guilty by reason of insanity, he said that the shooting was the greatest love offering in the history of the world. So, yeah. And that's our President's Day weekend stream. I think I make the argument, and this is not a very well thought out argument because I'd have to sort of gather my stuff, but I think that a lot of it has to deal with the fact that due to Christianity, even if you're not a Christian, Americans have like this kind of perception of you should get punished for your crimes, and we see that as not getting punished. Even though, yeah, it's definitely like there's all sorts of really amazing articles about how the insanity defense is not a get out of jail free card, but it was very much seen as that, and yeah. So that was our President's Day weekend stream. This will be up on, there is a YouTube channel that I put all my streams on once I do it. Once again, here's some places that you can find me. If you're at all interested in history, definitely recommend you check out History Scribe. It's me just posting a bunch of random history stuff I find. I said also I'm on Discord and AO3 as Captain_Rachel and as Captain-Rachel on Tumblr, where I post a whole bunch of random fandom stuff. For anyone who had been following me before I said on King's channel that I'm going to stream. So, a little bit of an update. I started doing very occasional. At first, they were kind of regular, like every Sunday streams. I started doing that last year, kind of around this time, a little bit later, because I'd gone to online teaching with the school, and then started doing it in the summer because I had no job. So I'd moved to the Central Valley from where I'd previously been living. Because I'm living with this is like a little granny unit that my father has. I had the good luck of getting a job once I moved here. I was at first a long-term sub for a teacher who, there was a school here, and one of their teachers got caught with some messages on his phone from school-age girls, so that's a big no-no. So I got hired first as a long-term sub for that guy, and then because there's a process they have to go through to fire teachers like that, and then I got hired for that job. Unfortunately, I am now in the same situation that I was last year, which is I have been something called non-reelected. How teaching works is they hire you for a school year. At first, this is if you're a new teacher. They hire you for a school year, and then at the end of the school year, legally before March 15th, they have to tell you if they're going to hire you for the next school year. And they can, if they're going to elect to hire you again. At any point, they can non-reelect. So they can elect not to hire you for another school year. It basically is just kind of it's not like I did anything wrong. I don't have concrete evidence, but I have pretty good evidence that it's the fact that, like happened last year, I got hired at a school that ended up being like, hey, we can get rid of the history teacher and have a tighter budget. So I am, once again, embarking on an odyssey of trying to find someone that will hire me. I've got a few pans in the fire. I'm starting a bit earlier than I was last time around. Last time around, I had to wait on getting some recommendation letters. So I'm very hopeful that I'll be having another job, but I don't know. I might not. But I have been on reelect. I will get at the very least unemployment. I at least have, a very supportive family, so I'm going to have a roof over my head no matter what. But hopefully at some point I'll come running into one of the various streams I'm on, or even on here, and be like, hey, I got a job. But that remains to be seen. Follow me on one of these other sources if you want. Probably at some point in the future I'll do another stream. Probably I'll end up doing a stream more toward the end of March, which is when I have my spring break. And then we'll likely stream over the summer. A lot of it just depends upon, do I have time? Do I have the mental energy, etc. But yes, Tumblr is a zombie bet. I would argue that Tumblr is almost more like Full Metal Alchemist homunculi. That we're that. Yeah, I don't know if I'd really want to be. The sort of thing with the job market is there's a lot of jobs. It's just a matter of I've got to apply to a bunch of them. The fact that I've been at 3 schools in 3 years is a little bit of like my intro letter talks about how, all these schools have just been, I've gotten great reviews. I have recommendations from all of them. I've just been a budget. So the biggest thing is just trying to hope the various prospects that are out there. And there are a lot out there. Like most jobs don't get posted until about March 15th, but even the ones that are posting right now, there's a fair amount of them. I'm actually a little bit hopeful that the private high school that I went to apparently needs a history teacher, and I'm a little bit hopeful that they'll hire me. So it's one of those. I wouldn't be, I'm obviously nervous, but I wouldn't be nervous until much later on. And yes, and as I said, I'm hoping they hire me. I love history. I'm enthusiastic about history. Worst case scenario, I end up on unemployment. I maybe end up doing some substituting and maybe try a little bit more seriously to make this be something I could do. But so various places to find me are on screen. With that, I'm gonna go see about getting dinner because it is roughly my dinner time. But yeah, thank you guys for coming to the stream. If you look at the channel description, there's a link to the YouTube, which has the previous streams I've done. I did. So I worked at the various schools I worked at. I worked at a school that was just south of Oakland, so inner city school. Then I worked at a small school kind of out in the country, very, very small school. I was the only teacher for the freshmen. So that's, most schools have at least 2 teachers teaching every grade sort of thing. And then currently I've been working at a fairly large school in Central California. So I've had a variety of experience. I'm a little bit lucky in the fact that, all I've got is my cat, so we can just kind of pick up and move everywhere. So I'm hopeful, but I appreciate, the good thoughts being put out or what have you. But yeah, so check the YouTube, check my Discord main page. There's a link to